Well, howdy. I hope you all can hear me. Can I get a mic check confirmation on that?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, howdy. I'm Kelly Wellman, and I am the Sustainability Director here at Texas A&M University. Really excited for our talk today. Happy Earth Day, by the way. I'm noticing with a lot of glee and enthusiasm, we have folks joining us from all around the world here to see Shelbi talk with us this morning. So we welcome you here at Texas A&M. And if you're not, local, our customary greeting is usually a howdy. So that's why I opened up with that. Wherever you're from, we're certainly glad that you're here. So this is really the keynote operation for us here at Texas A&M. We have spent the last almost 2 weeks celebrating Earth Month in a virtual way. And we are delighted to have Shelbi Orm that's going to be speaking to you really shortly. Before that, I do want to go over a couple things. First, let's see here. If you haven't used Zoom before, just a couple tips that will make this easier for you is to have your visuals in side-by-side mode. You do that by going to your toolbar and selecting side-by-side mode under the view options. Also, the live transcript should be activated so that you can see that. And if you're not wanting to see the closed captioning in your toolbar, you also have the ability to go to that and turn that off as needed. We encourage you to ask questions into the chat throughout the talk, and we're going to compile those. I've got my colleagues, Ben Kelsher and Jesse Carswell here that are also going to be assisting today. We'll collect all those questions as they come up and save those for the end where we can interact in person with Shelbi. And the other thing is that we are going to be recording the session because it will be part of kind of our archives here for the campus at Texas A&M. And if you don't want yourself to be visible, make sure to leave your camera off because we will be recording. So with that, I'm also going to let you know that, and this is only for students, faculty, and staff at Texas A&M, but we are doing prizes and incentives to get folks to attend the events. So if you're not from Texas A&M, this won't apply. Sorry about that, but for our Texas A&M cohorts that are here, if you've been to other events, we're doing prize giveaways. You collect points by attending our different events. Those points are actually maintained through getting code words. So every virtual event we host has a code word. One code word is 1 point, and for every one of those you get your name into a random draw entry. When you attend events live, you can get up to 7 code words. One of those code words will be said by the speaker and be visible on the screen. And then we drop all the additional code words into the chat. So be watching for those. Save all of those code words until the end of our virtual Earth Month activity events, which actually close tomorrow. And then send one email with every code word you've collected over the last 2 weeks to sustainability@tamu.edu. Let's see. The other thing is that for students, faculty, and staff, students here at Texas A&M, we've also partnered with the School of Innovation. So you can actually earn cash prizes by checking into your Maroon Base app and be entered into drawings for that. All prize details can be found on our website at this location here. The prizes, just in case you're curious and you haven't been to our event before, grand prize is a Nintendo Switch. We're also going to offer a variety of different fitness watches, headphone options, as well as Yeti cooler options, and also a GoPro 7. And last but not least, of course, we're giving away Office of Sustainability t-shirts and water bottles as additional prizes. All right, so with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen. And we're going to, let's see, I know that I saw Shelbi on, wow, this is fantastic. I got a lot of panels to go through here. So now to the main event. The reason that you have come from all across the country to be with us today is to hear from Shelbi. Shelbi Orm is an environmental activist and educator who uses her social media platforms with more than 300,000 followers to share how individuals can take action and make changes in their life to live more sustainably. Shelbi graduated from Texas A&M University in 2015 with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies. She also happens to be a former intern with the Office of Sustainability. Yeah. Shelbi's been living a zero waste lifestyle for over 5 years and has helped dozens of brands and communities align their eco-conscious values with their actions. So without further ado, Shelbi, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Can you see me, Kelly?
I got you. Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I am really so excited to be here. And as my audience knows, it's been a goal of mine for a long time to start more public speaking. And I can't think of a more perfect place than my alma mater. I am a former student of Texas A&M, so thank you so much, Kelly, for having me here. And on top of it being Texas A&M, it's Earth Day. So essentially the Olympics for environmentalists. So I'm so excited to be here, like I said. And I know, like I said, I am a former student of Texas A&M, so I know what it's like to come to these events, to tune in and then essentially tune out. So I ask that if you're here today to kind of be interactive with me. Against my better judgment, I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat as well as the polls that we're going to have today so that I can be interactive with you guys. And yeah, I think that's it. I'll go ahead and share my screen if that's okay with you, Kelly.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, and like I said, this is kind of a new platform for me. So you guys give me your grace. But here we go. Okay. All right. Okay. So can you see my screen, Kelly? We're good?
You're good, Shelby.
Okay, perfect. So like Kelly also mentioned, today, if you are a student of Texas A&M, there is a code word, and I'm just going to make it very generic and make it change, because that's what today's discussion that we're going to have is all about, is change. It's going to be talking mostly about change as individuals, because that's who I speak to most often. So yeah, that's what today's talk is going to be about. But just in general, starting off this talk, being about how you can make change as an individual, I've made a couple assumptions. One of the assumptions that I made, I assumed that you know that we have a plastic pollution crisis. Essentially, I'm teaching you how to make change, and I'm assuming that you know the problems. Which one of them is the plastic pollution crisis? I also assumed that maybe you are aware of the mountains of data showing that our climate is changing and that we are a driving force of that as humans. And lastly, I assumed that you're aware of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and just how much work there is to still be done to maintain a thriving planet. And I know those are a lot of assumptions, so I went ahead and provided the 17 goals that the UN has set for us for sustainable development. And today's video, or today's discussion, I'm so used to saying video, but in today's discussion, I'm going to be talking mostly about environmental sustainability. However, I do personally believe and was taught as an intern at the Office of Sustainability that to have a truly sustainable society, it's going to take a 3-pillar approach, which is finance, social, and environment, which is what these goals from the UN all encompass. But today I want to talk about how as an individual, you can influence change to align with these goals. So like I said, a lot of assumptions here. So my last assumption is that you knowing all of these things has prompted you to make a difference. And that brings us to our first poll, which is where I'm asking, do you feel that living a sustainable lifestyle is overwhelming? When I tell you I'm interested in you living a sustainable lifestyle, does that feel like, ugh, that sounds like a lot? Or do you feel like, yeah, I got this, I can do it? And the poll is a simple yes or no. I'd love to hear what you guys think. And it's interesting because I know a lot of my audience is here and you might be swaying the poll a little bit because I've tried my best to make sustainable living seem accessible. And it looks like we're about 50-50 here. And my goal of today's talk is to show you that living sustainably does not have to be overwhelming. So that's what I'm hoping to help you with today. All right. We close the poll at around 50-50 for each. Some of you think it's difficult, some of you don't. But I also want to just do really quickly why I wanted to talk about this today, how I got here and why I think change as an individual is possible. And I want to start with my background, which is that I was a student here and I got to do a lot of interesting opportunities. And when I left university, I thought, I'm going to go work for the government. That's where I can make the greatest change and that's where I want to be. So I went to work for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It's essentially the EPA of the state of Texas. But I don't have a lot of cool photos from while I was at TCEQ because it wasn't a place where really I thrived or where I felt like I could make the biggest difference. I worked there for almost 3 years and it felt more so like I was going along with the flow instead of driving change, which is what I'm really passionate about. So I don't have a lot of cool photos from that time, except for the time I almost caught a Bulbasaur at my office desk. But then after that, after realizing that I wasn't best suited to work in the government and enforcing things, I decided I would make the switch over to having a YouTube channel. And I did both of them for a really long time. And I found that it was a way that I could connect to something I'm incredibly passionate about, but make a big change, which brings me to today. So there are 4 different ways I think you can create change as an individual. Consequently, the list that you see on the screen is in order from probably the least impactful change in terms of overall difference for the environment, but it's also in order of what gets talked about the most in the media. So you can see that solid waste comes first, and the zero waste movement, for whatever reason, is the most hyped part of living a sustainable lifestyle. And then we have the other ones, which we're going to go over. But I want you to keep that in mind throughout today's discussion, that just because you put it first and just because it's what you see the most doesn't mean it's all we can do. And it also doesn't mean it's the most impactful thing we can do. But it's where we start because it's the most tangible. So your solid waste footprint. Did you, and this brings me to my next poll. So if you answer the polls, I think that's fun. So let me know. Do you think the amount of plastic that actually gets recycled right now, currently in today's society, is more or less than half? So if we take all of the plastic that there is and we say how much of it is being recycled, is it more or less than half? Let's see. I'm going to see. Oh, poll question number 2. There we go. Oh, wait. It's poll question. Oh, there it goes. Uh-oh.
Sorry, Shelby, I don't see that question worded the same way.
Okay, you're good.
No. You have a yard where you live currently on mine.
Yes, I see. You guys are good. Well, how about I'll jump to the chat and you tell me, do you think we recycle more or less than half of the plastic that we currently produce? Most of you are saying less, much less, definitely less. Okay. I guess that when people ask questions like this, it becomes a little bit obvious that they're asking for a reason, right? So the answer is yes, we definitely recycle less than half of all the plastic that is currently being used. And we only recycle about 9% of all the plastic that has ever been created. So again, this brings me back to the plastic pollution crisis we have. And I think that so many people connect with this part of it because it's so tangible. We see it on the beaches, we see it in the rivers. We are interacting with plastic on a daily basis. So it's the thing that seems most tangible to us. And I wanted to just share some other information. The average American throws away 4.5 pounds of trash every single day. And this one's a little crazy, 70 pounds of clothing every single year. As a former hyper consumer, I can attest. It's a very sad reality of American consumerism. The world plastic production has increased exponentially from 2.1 million tons the year my dad was born, to 147 million tons the year I was born, to 406 million tons by 2015. And the US is the #1 trash producing country in the world at 1,609 pounds per person per year. And not only that, but some of these numbers are insane. So we discard 16 billion diapers a year, 1.6 billion pens, 2 billion razor blades, and enough aluminum to rebuild the US commercial air fleet 4 times over. So you can see we have a serious problem when it comes to solid waste. So what can we do about it as individuals? What the heck can we do? Obviously. Well, these are all single-use products that likely have shown up in your life, whether you're using them currently or someone you know uses them every single day, or you use them once upon a time. Single-use items are the things that are showing up on our beaches often, the things that we see in the oceans, and the things that we have the closest relationship to, the things that we can actually touch. So what can you do with these items, right? Well, there's a reusable version for all of them. The first one that comes to mind, and probably the most common one, is a reusable water bottle, which, like Kelly said, if you're a student at Texas A&M, they'll be giving some of them out. I had one when I was a student and it was my favorite thing. But instead of using single-use plastic water bottles, obviously, a reusable one is going to be more sustainable. And because as humans, water is the most essential thing to our lives, it's something that will drastically reduce your own personal plastic footprint. And then as a student, I know I cooked a lot because I couldn't afford to eat out too much. So single-use foil, something that you use for minutes, all of these items on screen are things that we use for a finite amount of time, usually less than an hour, sometimes less than a minute, but they last on this planet for a very long time, except for the paper towels. they'll disintegrate technically, but they come from trees. We have to keep that in mind. So a reusable swap that you can make for aluminum foil is a reusable silicone baking sheet. Same thing with paper towels. Before we had paper towels, I hate to tell you, but there were reusable towels. So reusable cloths, and same thing for single-use plastic baggies. There are reusable silicone ones. So these are all ways that you can make a tangible, visible difference in your life. And like I said at the beginning, although these things are the most tangible and the thing that we have the most interaction with, they're not the biggest way to make a change. But for me, it was definitely the perfect starting point. And then I have some other things that probably you interact with on a daily basis, like single-use makeup wipes. Absolutely. When I was a student, I used them all the time. And there are simple reusable ones. Same thing with your shampoo that might come in a plastic bottle, the things that are showing up on our shorelines. Simple swap these days, shampoo bars. So many brands are having them. These are from Lush, but you can also find them at Walmart now. They're accessible in terms of availability to you locally in so many places. And swapping from a plastic toothbrush to a bamboo toothbrush and from a plastic razor, since we heard that about 2 billion of them are thrown out in this country every year, to a reusable safety razor if you can. There are some caveats to safety razors that make it a little bit difficult for some people, but these are all reusable things that you can change in your life that will make a significant impact on the amount of plastic pollution that you are contributing to the world. Next up, like I said, I'm also so used to being able to edit out my mess ups, but you guys are all watching me today. So like I said, we're going in order from probably the things that you see talked about the most, but that have progressively a bigger footprint. So changing our habits is going to have a really big impact on the planet, as opposed to just swapping one item for another. But what habits should we change? What habits are having the biggest impact on the planet? And right now, one of our habits as American citizens is that the US wastes more than $160 billion in food every year. And what that looks like is a scary food waste monster. I found this on Google Gifts. I thought it would give you a chuckle while you're watching this. But globally, we throw about 1.3 billion tons of food every year. That's about a third of all the food that we grow. Let that sink in. A third of all the food that we grow is going to waste. Estimates are that about 40% of that food wasted comes from consumers, but remember, that leaves 60% coming from not us as consumers. And food wasted and lost has a huge carbon footprint, or greenhouse gas footprint, I should say, because it's not just carbon, it's also other greenhouse gases like methane, but this is equivalent to a 3.3 billion tons of carbon emissions. So it's also statistically true that if food waste was its own country, it would be the third largest contributor to greenhouse gases in the world, behind the US and China. Let that sink in. Okay. So what can we do here, and why is it happening? Why do we have this habit of throwing out so much food? Well, as a consumer, like you heard, 40% of that food waste is coming from us. And I would raise my hand and say that I am guilty in the past. I'm very careful about it now. But in the past of going to the store, not having a thought through plan, and then buying that bag of salad mix that you have the best intention of actually going home and eating, and 2 weeks later, it's disgusting in your fridge and you have to toss it. That's the type of food waste that's happening, on top of things like leftovers and stuff like that in our individual homes. But where's the other 60% coming from? And that part might shock you. This other habit we have, not just as Americans, but also as a society globally. So I wanted to show you this quick little video of beauty standards within our food industry and why so much food is going to waste. I'll just play this really quickly. It's pretty short.
It's very.
Let me just make sure. Can you hear my sound, Kelly? I don't know if I remember to click that button when I shared my screen.
I can hear your sound.
Okay, perfect.
Supermarket specifications on sizing. Okay,
What's this?
so this is too big.
So what, that whole lot will go?
Correct.
How much do you lose at this stage?
Sometimes it goes up to as high as 40%.
40%.
Right here.
Seriously,
right
at
here.
this point here?
Yes. All right, so we'll measure this banana, and 260 is acceptable.
So that
Sorry.
much.
Makes it unacceptable.
And what about this side?
No, too small.
Too small.
Too small. Correct.
So this is going to be thrown out, does it?
I have to throw this away today.
Can I keep this one though?
You can keep that. You
I
sure
want to
can.
keep this one.
So I wanted to play that because we have a serious habit, as you can see from the numbers, of getting rid of perfectly good food. And it seems crazy because there are also a significant amount of people who are experiencing food insecurity in today's world. Excuse me. So basically what she's describing is what the numbers show to be about 40% of our food going to waste before it ever makes it to the grocery store. So that 40% that comes from us, there's the equivalent happening before it makes it to the grocery store because of beauty standards. Oh, hello. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I made this cute little slide for you to show that that's like taking these 10 apples, and you can see that some of them look a little big, a little small, but they all are food, right? But before they ever make it to the grocery store, they're tossed and they're turned into waste, which is contributing to this massive greenhouse gas footprint and also losing food and causing a serious waste problem, serious problem that we have. So you probably, or if you're like me as a young environmentalist, maybe you think, what's the big deal, Shelbi? Food is food and it's biodegradable, right? I can throw it in the trash, I can send it to the landfill, and it's gonna break down. That might be a nice thought to have, but that's not actually how it works. Food does not break down in landfills. And I will explain why that is. Because if you think about it, when something breaks down, it's because it's sitting out in the sun, right? The sun has a lot to do with our natural ecosystems and our natural processes. When something is buried in a landfill, it doesn't have access to sun. Not only that, but that apple that's sitting in the landfill is also surrounded by the other problem that we talked about, plastic. We have a lot of plastic, obviously, in our landfills and just material in general that's not biodegradable. So when that apple is buried under material that's not biodegradable, it doesn't have access to sun and it doesn't have access to water. It doesn't break down properly. It needs oxygen and it needs sun. And the other unfortunate part of this, not only are we wasting resources to grow that food just to throw it out, not only is it contributing to greenhouse gases because it's not breaking down properly, but it's also, it's also contributing to this issue that we have with soil. That's a really big topic that we won't dive too much into, but our soil in the US currently is seriously depleted of nutrients. And it's because we continuously grow and grow and grow more things and take from the earth and then put it in a landfill where it can't give back to the earth. Aside from the fact that it can't break down properly and it's contributing to greenhouse gases, it's also not giving back to soil like nature intended. So what can we do about this? What is the habit to replace our food waste habit? And if you're a member of my audience, you might know this, but I'm hoping that a lot of you aren't aware of what compost is. Composting is absolutely a new habit that almost anyone can take on. And that's actually why I asked the question, do you have a yard? So if that poll, Kelly, if you want to go ahead and open it, you guys can respond before I get to my next point. But there are so many different ways that you can compost as an individual. And I know that when I lived as a student, I lived in an apartment. And then obviously for years after that, also I lived in an apartment. And composting is a habit that you don't have to have a yard for. This beautiful display here that they have, yes, that is the most traditional way to compost, but it's not the only way. So, excuse me, I came up with some ways to share with you that you can still compost even if you live in an apartment. So when I lived in an apartment at Texas A&M, for all of you who are students there, I actually was friends with the manager over at Howdy Farm. And if you haven't visited over there, I think there might be a new manager now, but still a great resource that exists. And I used to drop off my compost there. So that's what the drop off one over on the right side is. If you live in an apartment, drop off composting is a great option. Not only if you have something awesome as a resource like a community garden on campus, but if you live outside of College Station, I know a lot of you do, drop off places for your local community gardens. Just a neighbor in general, someone in your area that composts, you could drop it off with them. A farmer, if you go to a farmer's market and you make friends with some of the farmers, maybe some of them will be willing to take on your compost so that you're not contributing to this massive habit of wasting food. And instead you're creating a new habit, which is composting food. which obviously has a million benefits. So those are just a few options for if you live in an apartment. Other really creative ones that exist are bokashi composting. This is a method of composting where you use a bran. That's the best way to describe it. A bran that helps your food break down on your countertop. There are also worm composting bins for indoors. I don't know how you feel about having worms in your house, but that's an option if you don't have a yard. So those are all different options, even if you can't do it in a traditional way. And then most excitingly, there is a mechanical compost. There are different brands who make these. Most recently, one of my favorite brands, Pila, released one. They're not super accessible in terms of cost, whereas like Drop Off and Bokashi are probably a lot more accessible. Then you have the traditional way, obviously, and a tumbler compost, which is what I personally use right now. So this is the habit to replace our food wasting habit. And creating new habits is incredibly important to sustainability and to making change as an individual. This is just one example, but it's a really good example and one that can have a really big impact. So I decided to go a little bit in depth on composting. But my overall message here is not just start composting. My overall message of this section is we need to create new habits. We currently have so many habits that are incredibly wasteful to the environment. And there are easy habits that we can replace those with to have a much better societal overall benefit. There is one more way you can compost, which is chickens. I currently have 2 chickens. They are the source of all my joy and also all my stress currently, but they are great little composters. They will eat absolutely anything. And I know, like I said, I want to keep this accessible to people who don't have a yard to compost, but also just wanted to share a cute picture of my chickens. Okay, so like I said, this is just one example of habit change. I'd love to discuss more habits with you. If you're someone who follows me, I share about them all the time, but there are so many habits that we can change to have a bigger impact on the planet. So like I said, we're going in order of what's talked about most, but also we're getting to the things that have an even bigger impact than just changing your solid waste footprint or changing your habits. The next little section is voting with your dollars. And if you follow me, you're very familiar with the fact that I believe that this is the most impactful way that we can make a difference as Americans specifically. Because as Americans, I know we say that the biggest American pastime is baseball, but judging by the statistics I see and the data we're seeing, consumerism and shopping is definitely quickly becoming the biggest pastime of Americans. So by voting with our own dollars, we show what we want to see more and what we want to see less of. And we are conscious about the impacts that our purchases have on the environment before they make it to us, right? Because reducing your footprint of what is thrown away, your solid waste footprint, is addressing the problem after the item makes it to you. Addressing the problem by voting with your dollars is addressing the issue before it makes it to you. So I have a question. And I remember in my first environmental science class ever, my professor asked me this. And I thought 8 ounces. It takes 8 ounces to make an 8-ounce cup of coffee. And this is a poll. I think Kelly, yeah, she's queuing it up for you. I want to know, how many cups of water do you think it takes to make a cup of coffee, right? 8 ounces. I don't drink coffee on a daily basis, but if you do, you're probably thinking about eight ounces to make a cup of coffee. But when we think about voting with our dollars, the important thing to realize is that what we see is not always the impact of what we're getting. So it looks like a lot of you got the correct answer, which is to make 1 cup of coffee, it takes 150 cups of water to make. And if you're not aware of like resource footprint or eco-minimalism that I'm always preaching about, you might be wondering, how the heck is this possible? Which again, I wonder the same thing. How? And this is how. In order to get anything to you, it has a resource footprint. In terms of coffee, water is the best way to display that because it takes water to grow and to manufacture that coffee. But that's just an example for water. Pretty much anything that you buy has a footprint before it makes it to you. I've seen estimates all over the board of how much waste is created behind the scenes before something makes it to you in comparison to the actual waste that you make. But one of the higher estimates I've seen is that for every pound of trash that we produce behind the scenes, there are 70 times that happening in the manufacturing process, in the shipping process, in the growing process, in the mining process, etc. So I have another one that's really fun. How many pounds of raw materials does it take to make a 4.5 ounce iPhone? I don't think I queued this one up for polling, Kelly. I don't think I did.
We don't have that one, Shelby.
Yeah, you're good. I don't think I did. But this one always blows my mind because if you hold your phone, you realize it's a pretty light material. Couldn't take a lot of materials to make this like less than half a pound of a device. But the truth is that it takes 295 pounds of raw materials to create that device. And again, you might ask, how? And it's because so many raw materials go into making these iPhones. They extract these minerals and materials from the earth, and it takes a lot of this material that comes out in little pieces, jammed together and baked down to form an iPhone. This is the actual breakdown if you're curious about which materials go in and how much weight per thing. This study was done, I believe, by the Society for Ceramics, and it's really interesting. So I thought I would share it because I feel like that always helps me picture how much waste is behind the scenes to get this little thing to me. And I know that when I talk about these two things, right, coffee and smartphones, very integral to today's society. Most people love their iPhones and they love their coffee. I understand. So does this mean I have to give up my coffee and my phone to be an environmentalist? Obviously, I have a phone. So I'll get into why I still have a phone and how that works for me. This is something I call eco-minimalism. So this is the practice essentially of combining sustainability and minimalism to buy as little things as we can new to have the smallest footprint that we can. And this is voting with our dollars, right? We want to see not mines for aluminum, cutting down forests to mine for those materials, blowing off mountaintops, and all the things that come with the resources that we need to make these items. So by giving less of our dollars to that industry, we're telling them, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I don't think it's sustainable, and I want to vote against this. And so that's also where minimalism comes in, because living in today's society, we cannot just remove ourselves from buying anything ever, right? I am not, I'm not in the clouds here. I understand that we can't give up society and living as normal. We want to still be part of society. We just care about the planet, right? So the idea here is to buy as little as you can new. So sustainability plus minimalism, this is eco minimalism, and I'm always preaching about it. And you might still be wondering, hey, Shelby, but do I need to give up coffee and my phone to be an environmentalist? Well, I personally don't drink coffee every morning, not because I'm an environmentalist, just because I'm scared of developing a caffeine addiction. So my answer to this is no. You do not have to give up coffee or your iPhone to be an environmentalist. That's my personal opinion. You do not have to give up those things to create change as an individual. I think you should never give up something that brings value to your life. Instead, focus on other areas that you can change, because we can influence change in so many different ways than to give up something that is so integral to being a part of today's functioning society. So other things you can do, for example, are ignoring fast fashion trends, not just fashion, but there are trends that happen all the time in terms of little gadgets and gadgets that you can buy that you should think through the purchase of, right? I remember when fidget spinners were a big trend. I went to the beach like a couple weeks after they had become a trend and found 4 of them on the beach. And it's because they become a trend. People get excited about the trend and they buy this thing and they don't value it. And so eventually it becomes waste. And I don't think that we should be voting with our dollars, that we think it's okay to continuously extract things from the planet to make something and then to toss it. So that's the kind of the idea here, to really think through anything that you buy and to avoid trends. Skipping out on impulse buys is very similar, especially with today's day and age with Facebook and Instagram and Amazon. Everything is an impulse buy. You think about it and then within minutes, you can have it on your screen to buy it. And within days, it can be at your door. So really, really trying to skip out on those sort of buys. Taking up new hobbies that do not include spending money or shopping, because like I said, as Americans, and according to the data, we do it for fun. So finding new hobbies to replace that, and obtaining the next item you need used. As you may have heard me reference, my theory of eco-minimalism is to buy as little as you can new. So that's how I own this iPhone. I bought it secondhand. I didn't give my money to say, hey, I think we should continue to extract resources to make this product that you plan to fail within too short of a time. We won't get into that, but I don't want to vote with my dollars for more of that. So as an individual, my choice to create change is to buy things secondhand. It's a good option. And then making changes in other areas of your life that are maybe not so integral. Like I said, I know coffee and your phone is definitely that way. So this is not what the presentation is focused on, but if coffee is coming to your mind and you're thinking, how do I choose a more sustainable version? These are some logos to look out for. It's more sustainable ways to source coffee. Just thought I would throw this out here because I know some people, coffee is their thing. So like I said, I know it's very sacred to other people. So let's talk about some other areas where maybe you can change. You're aware that your phone has a massive footprint now, and you're also aware that coffee has a massive footprint now, and you don't want to change these two things. So focus on another area. Like I said, this is just an example of something that I did in the past. I used to use this laundry detergent. It had a green leaf on it, right? So when I walked into Target to buy it, I thought that's eco-friendly, didn't think about it again. And that's what I was using when I was in college, until I found out that the top 10 plastic contributors were these guys right here. And then I realized that the laundry detergent that I was buying is made by none other than Unilever, number 4 here on our top 10 plastic contributors. And I decided that I no longer wanted to vote with my dollar, that I thought it was okay that Unilever continued to produce these items and not take responsibility for the havoc they were wreaking on the environment. So I switched to drops. This is a very simple example of if you didn't want to give up your coffee because you absolutely love that brand of coffee you use, focus on another area. You know, I often get asked, is this more sustainable than this? You know, is another brand of laundry detergent more sustainable than this brand? I don't think it's so important as to decide, is this more sustainable than this? I think you just make a conscious choice and then you do what works best for you. And often people ask me, I'm an artist and it's an incredibly wasteful hobby and I don't want to give it up, but it's so wasteful. What can I do? And my answer is always, there are a million ways to live more sustainably, to influence change as an individual without giving up something that means so much to you. So focus on a different area. That was the only point of bringing up my laundry detergent. And then I want you to not leave in silence. Now this might sound like, well, we just totally shifted gears. What is she talking about? I'm saying that when you switch from a brand like 7th Generation, who is owned by Unilever, who are the top contributors to plastic pollution, don't just switch to drops. I want you to tell them why you left and what they need to do to make it better. Because you and me can make the switch from 7th Generation / Unilever to drops and have all that plastic reduction, right? No more plastic bottles. Drops is shipped to your house, plastic free, carbon neutral. It's great. And as an individual, yes, that is important, but that choice that we're making is not enough. These big brands like Unilever, the top plastic contributors, they need to be making these changes too. So when you leave, tell them why and what you want to see them do better at. Which brings me to the last little section here. Like I said, we're getting to the things that make the biggest difference, but they get talked about the least. And holding businesses and legislators accountable is definitely going to have a really, really big impact on the planet. And that doesn't mean that our individual choices don't matter, because our individual choices tell the market what we want to see more and less of. Always remember that. You and me switching our laundry detergent won't save the planet, but it will tell Unilever that we don't support what they're doing anymore. So voting with your dollars, but not leaving in silence so that you can hold those businesses accountable. What does that look like? What does holding businesses and legislators accountable look like? Well, for one, it can look like emailing a brand to ask for transparency. If you are now realizing what the water resource footprint is, what the material resource footprint is of the things that you're buying, ask them. Where do you mine these materials? Are people paid fair wages? Are you doing anything to make sure that your mining process is more sustainable, etc.? Ask for transparency. It's incredibly important. Then you can ask your representative to support a bill. I actually took the liberty of picking out a bill that is currently going through the legislature here in Texas so that we can talk about it. But finding out who your representative is and then asking them to support bills that have to do with environmental change are going to have a really big impact. And it's something you can do as an individual. Signing petitions to stop wasteful practices or unethical practices. This is Fashion Revolution Week. It coincides with Earth Day usually. And there are petitions all around to make changes with fast fashion. And there are all sorts of petitions, I'm sure, this week in general, to talk to your representatives and to change plastic pollution, etc. Signing petitions is really important. Other things you can do that you're asking brands and legislators for transparency or to make a change: ask brands to switch to plastic-free packaging, request more recycling bins at your favorite park, and ask your local officials what their plan is to address climate change. Like I said, this is not the sexiest part of it, but it is the things that can have some of the biggest changes. So this can be as simple and passive or as intricate and involved as you have the time and energy for. I understand not everybody wants to dedicate their life to being an environmental activist. So if you need to do something that's more passive, I've got options for you. If you're someone who has a lot of time and energy and you really want to use this Earth Day as your catalyst to change the world, I have some options for that as well. But I just want to give you a little example of something I did semi-recently. So this is the deodorant I've used for 5 years or so. And I personally don't think that you should have to stink to be an environmentalist or to be somebody who cares about sustainability. So this is the only deodorant that worked for me that I could wear and I didn't stink. And as you can see, it comes in plastic. And so for years, I used this plastic deodorant because it was the only one that was aluminum free, wouldn't clog my pores, that I could use. So I found a way to reuse the tubes. I was giving them to a woman who makes her own DIY. She was reusing them. It was a great system for me. I felt pretty good about it. But I did not continue buying this deodorant that's in plastic in silence. I asked almost every other month for probably 3 years for Native to create a deodorant that wasn't made in plastic. I felt uneasy about the fact that I was continuously buying this plastic, which, if you didn't know, plastic is made from petroleum. So secondhandly, in a way, supporting the fossil fuel industry to buy this deodorant that came in plastic. And then I wasn't throwing it away, but I also wasn't, I was still producing that plastic, right? It still had the same footprint, whether I reused it or not. I didn't feel great about it. So I asked them for years to create a plastic-free deodorant. I never stopped. And then I want to say Earth Day last year, they announced that they had a plastic-free deodorant. And so now that is a big difference in my personal life. As an individual, I no longer am buying and giving away plastic tubes. I'm now able to compost these tubes at my home, and I feel great about it. But that was my individual change. But think about how many people now have access to deodorant that actually works without plastic because a company made a change, because I asked them to. I won't say that it was all to do with me. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people asked them to create a deodorant that was plastic free. But this is a very clear example of asking a business to make a change, and then they do, so that many other people have access to that same change with you. So this is a pretty hands-off approach because all I did was send an email, right? It wasn't too intricate, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. And like I said, I have options here for people who do have more time on their hands. So these random letters and numbers might not mean a lot to you, but it is a piece of legislation that is currently within the Texas legislature. House Bill 4022 and Senate Bill or State Bill 1276 is like this. This is what it looks like to go onto the website and read about the bills. So again, I say, I understand why this is not everyone's cup of tea, but as an individual, if you pay attention to what is being passed in terms of environmental legislation, you can use your voice to make a change. Instead of making you read through the craziness that is this, let me tell you basically what it is. There's a huge waste problem in Texas, not only in terms of plastic, but in terms of tires and all sorts of waste streams that we just don't have a very good solution for currently. Currently, the state of Texas, according to the, I believe this is Texans for Clean Water, the organization who is spearheading this legislation, $50 million, 50 million tax dollars wasted in litter and illegal dumping. So if we could take control of that waste stream in some way, if we could at least enact some policy that we have to do better, businesses have to do better as well, then we can make a change. So this is kind of what's proposed to protect. This is Lake Travis here if you don't live in Texas. The proposal is basically what our grandparents did, y'all. This was a normal thing, and still in many states, it is a normal thing. It's a deposit system. We pay 1 cent for certain materials that we've seen a lot of pollution from, that we want to see cleaned up out of the environment. When we buy something, we well, I shouldn't say we, whoever wants to be part of this, because I try to remove myself from these things as much as possible, but I understand that accessibility is still an issue. So obviously people still drink from plastic water bottles and all those sort of things. Various other materials will be a part of this program. But anyway, the point is you pay a cent, then you drink it, and then you can collect it and get 25 cents per pound as a rebate. This is something that worked for generations, as well as something that's working currently right now. If you pick up any, I don't have one around me, but if you pick up any plastic bottle, you'll see on the back it has the deposit, how much someone can get back if they bring it back. And it'll tell you the states where that's applicable. So this is what is currently proposed. And what, as someone who lives in Texas, you can ask your representative to support, which we're going to get to. But the more removed way of being part of this is something that I said in the beginning, signing a petition. Texans for Clean Water are the ones who encourage people to introduce this, and they're the driving force behind it right now. So if you just go to this website, if you want to screenshot it, whatever works for you, you can also probably just Google it. You can publicly endorse the plan. So if you live here, you put in your zip code, your name, you've signed the petition. That convinces more people to make a change. Something you can do as an individual. Okay, so if you want to do something that's more involved, you need to find out who your representative is. This is a way to find out who your representative is, specifically if you live in Texas. That link there at the top will tell you who your representative is in your district, in your Senate, and Congress, all of them. It's a really great resource if you live in Texas. Head to this URL, find out who your representative is. Particularly, I did the research for you. If you live in College Station, Brazos County, these are your representatives at the state level. These are the people you want to ask to support this piece of legislation. This is just an example, right? We're going over how to influence our representatives and businesses to make a change. And this is just one example of current legislation that you can support. So these are your representatives. And I also took the liberty of writing you a very simple draft of what you could say to them to ask them to make this change. And again, as an individual, you sending this very short email, or you can make it a postcard, can make a massive difference. So yeah, this is just a sample for this one piece of legislation. You can also use this as a template for how to contact your congressman or your senator, all those people who are voting on even bigger bills up at the federal level. And I actually created a whole site just for today. I'm launching it on Earth Day. So cool. But this is basically for the talk that I was giving for you guys today. That if you want help for how to write to your representatives and to businesses, I think they're very similar. This website right here has a complete guide of how to do so. And I think that as an individual, that is the thing that you can do to make a really big difference. It may seem small, but when you gather and when more people, okay, right, so you and me send in the letter, that can make a big difference, because honestly, you may think that these representatives get a lot of contacts, they get contacted a lot about all this legislation, but the truth is, who do you know that's ever written to their representative? Who in your family or your friend group have actually ever taken advantage and done that? So that's where getting more people to join helps. Community is so important to environmental activism and into making a change. And a lot of people say that one person or a small community can't make a difference. And I forget whose quote it is. But indeed, the only thing that's ever made a change in environmental movements, social movements, all those things, is a small group of people. It all starts with one person and maybe a couple of their friends to make a big change. Because if we go from just this one bill that you and I, or this one letter that you and I write about this bill, suddenly we get our friends involved and it turns into hundreds, if not thousands of things submitted to our representatives, and they have to listen. So in terms of finding a community, I just want to go over really quickly, specifically, if you are at Texas A&M, do you know of any sustainably minded groups on campus? Leave them in the chat. But aside from just on campuses, if you know of anybody who is creating a community, right, it can be in your neighborhood app. The neighborhood app has been amazing for me in realizing how important community is. Through the freeze that we went through in Texas, I met so many of my neighbors. I met so many people who live in my community and realized just how important it is to have those people there when you need them, and how much you can do when you band together as a community. So really important. But there are communities online as well. Facebook groups, once again, such a key since I've adopted these chickens. Everything I've learned is from my local San Antonio chicken group. But you can apply the same sentiment to environmentalism. So definitely really think about how impactful community can be. So these are just a few groups on campus that you can join. There are a lot more. Like I said, today's talk focus was on environmental sustainability, but the Office of Sustainability at Texas A&M focuses on social, financial, or economic, and environmental sustainability. And it is important to bring all of those things together to have a successful environmental movement. And as an individual, that pretty much ties up all the things you can do. So I just wanted to leave you off with my quote, which is, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And I hope that you took that away from the discussion today, that there are things we can do. We can't do everything, but we all can do something. So yeah, if you guys don't already follow me, I'm Shelbi everywhere on the internet. And I'd be happy to take any questions. I think Kelly can cue some up for me. And I'll show you, I'll stop sharing my screen. Well, yeah, I'll show you my lovely face.
Shelbi, thank you so much for being with us here on Earth Day. I cannot describe the feelings I have seeing you here today and thinking about when you first came through the doors in our office many years ago. What a great way to kick off my day. And I have learned a lot, not only from what you're saying, but then from watching, all the conversation in the chat. It's been incredible. I'm wondering, because we've seen lots of different questions kind of coming up on the side and are compiling those. I realize that we have almost 140 folks here. And I'm also thinking you've got quite a following from all over that's joining us today. They probably don't normally get to interact with you in such a live space. So if you're willing, I'm going to attempt maybe to allow people to unmute themselves and ask a specific question. And if we can manage this successfully, that's what we'll do. And if not, then we'll stop that off and I will kick off questions. And so I'll let folks, if they want to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and ask. But while people are thinking about whether they want to do that, Shelbi, let's see, I was looking through and here's one that I thought too. I mean, with different representatives, and this is so important, the idea of understanding who you are connected to in your community, that we are voting for our politicians, whether it's city council, whether it's the county, whether it's state, and goes from there. And I saw some conversation about people living in places where their representatives are climate deniers and they just simply don't care. So have you encountered, I mean, I know you've encountered it, but what suggestions do you have to kind of keep their spirits going, knowing that the leadership isn't quite in the same space that you think we need to be headed?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I live in Texas, and I obviously my senator is a climate denier. I mean, it's just very unfortunate, but he is, and well, one of them. And yeah, I definitely have dealt with this as an environmentalist from Texas, the largest oil producing state, and also the largest wind power producing state. It's very important to try to think about the positive. So I always try to balance, like, yeah, the biggest oil producing state, but also like the most wind power generated. But like I said in this discussion, community is incredibly important. And we saw that in the 2020 election. What happened in Georgia was incredible, absolutely world changing, to be honest. When a group of people can come together to make a difference, you can get rid of the climate deniers. I mean, I think we saw that. I think that Georgia is a perfect case study of the fact that that can happen. So I think finding community is the biggest tip I can give you. Facebook groups, like I said, are a big deal. The Zero Waste or Sustainable movement, also other movement groups. So the Sunrise Movement is a climate activist group for young people, Gen Z and millennials, I think all across the board. And they have organized groups, meetings all the time. So it's great to join a chapter of a group like that because honestly, persistence and over time can create real change. Like I said, what we saw in Georgia.
Great example. If you want to try, if folks in the chat, if you want to try to raise your hand, that would probably help us manage questions. I'm going to wait a second to see if anyone, I see some hands raised. Sarah K, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can I turn my video on, or do you just want me to unmute myself?
Yeah, if you're comfortable with your video on, that's fine.
Excuse me.
Okay, awesome. Well, first I just wanted to say this is actually really crazy that I'm getting to talk to you right now. So I've been subscribed to you for 2 years now, so this is great.
Oh, thank you.
So
Also, your room is so cute. Okay.
Oh, thank you. So I go to the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a supply chain major, so I'm more in the business aspect. And the other week I got to go to a symposium and talk to like the vice president of operations at P&G. And I didn't get to ask her a question. So I just wanted to see this question from your take. So do you think like companies like say smaller ones like Ethique, like Meow Meow, Tweet, Blue Land, Drops, do you think it would be beneficial if bigger parent companies such as like P&G and Unilever would maybe like adopt these or work with these companies to maybe make it more accessible and like say price accessible for more consumers? Or do you think that overall it would just kind of like maybe invalidate these smaller, more eco-friendly companies since they would be working with these bigger brands that are also have like more unsustainable lines?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. That's a great question and something that I wanted to talk about because actually I think I have a video coming out later this week talking about this, but it's such a delicate discussion because currently as it stands, most environmentalists, when something is owned by a giant conglomerate brand, they shoo it away. As I kind of described in this thing that I did as well. But the issue of accessibility that you're bringing up is incredibly important to have massive scale change. Like if we don't get Unilever and P&G on board, are we ever going to create enough change to see market change, right? So it's such a double-edged sword because as soon as something is owned by P&G, environmentalists shoot it down. And I also the issue of accessibility when you talk about things like Unilever and P&G, accessibility in terms of being able to go to the store and get it, but also a big part of accessibility is the cost, like you said. And I know right now Drops is actually is pretty on par with Tide, which is good, but that's just one example. And obviously throughout the supply chain, when things are more affordable, it's usually because there's a shortcut taken somewhere, right? And as a supply chain management person, I'm sure you know, I'm such a geek for supply chain, but it's such a complicated question. I think that we have to have, probably an intersectional discussion where environmentalists stop boycotting something just because it's owned by Unilever, or more so contacting Unilever and asking them to do better, or P&G as well. They're also a huge one. It definitely, have you heard of Loop, Sarah? Sorry, I know I was just on a tirade, but have you heard of
Is that the, like it's like recycling or so? I've heard of it. I'm not really quite sure.
Yeah, so basically it's really interesting. I encourage any of you guys about talking about accessibility and like big brands to look it up. Basically TerraCycle partnered with a lot of these big brands like Tide and like just a bunch of different P&G and Unilever. And right now I think it's in most major cities. Obviously it will need some expansion in terms of accessibility, but they actually convince brands like Tide to put their stuff in reusable packaging, and then through Loop, you can send back your packaging. So it's a similar price point, obviously very accessible if it comes to your home, but obviously needs to be expanded. But that's a really interesting discussion that started with Tom Sasaki, the owner of TerraCycle, and really interesting to study like what differences that can make. But that could be one solution. But yeah, I love this question, Sarah, but definitely like not one answer to it, right?
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, it seems that there was another hand raised, but it went away. I'm just wait just a second to see if we get anyone else who wants to specifically ask a question. And okay, well, no. Shelbi, I was thinking, listening to you talk and with a lot more emphasis that we're seeing certainly on circular economy. Oh, wait, I see Haley. Haley, I'm not going to mess your name up by trying to pronounce it, but please, if you want, go for it.
I didn't mean to interrupt if you want to keep going.
No, go ahead. I'm happy for you to ask a question.
Okay. All right. I'll share my video as well. I happen to be at work, so I have my work background up, but thank you so much for sharing this today. I'm really excited to talk to you. I've been a long-time subscriber. I'm also in Austin, Texas, so
cool.
Just excited all around. I happen to work for a large global company. We have employee resource groups, and I happen to be a lead of our Austin Green Team ERG. Our company is currently running a pilot to determine like the state of returning back to the office post-COVID. Do you happen to have any resources I could provide on like the environmental impacts of like literally hundreds of employees going back to commuting?
Right. I think I've seen some, so The Guardian is a great resource. They focus a lot on environmental like news and studies and stuff like that. I think they have one specifically on how much reduction we've seen and how like a post-COVID world could be so different if we removed commuting. I'm pretty sure they have a few articles on it. I know they did one on like the issues of reusables and how that's not an issue with COVID and all that sort of thing. But I would definitely point you to the Guardian and search there. I think there's some already some finite or definite data on the differences we can make there.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right, what we're going to do is we've got Gracie, then Caitlin with questions. So we'll go ahead. Gracie, you're up.
Hi, I'm actually from Indiana. I'm not related to the school or anything, but I'm actually a nursing student and working in health right now. And so I haven't heard you touch much on like the healthcare perspective of things. I was just wondering if you had any like thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think that when we talk about healthcare specifically, I get a little, I don't know what the word is, a little frustrated when people are like, yeah, plastic pollution, but what about healthcare? Because there's definitely a lot of like waste happening in the healthcare system. I only know from secondhand experience or information. My sister is in PA school. She actually worked a COVID unit as a rotation, which was a little wild to see from the outside. But yeah, I think there's definitely ways to reduce waste within the medical field. But I also feel that if there's any field where it's justified, it's probably there. And I think that there are so many, like I keep saying, there are so many areas to focus on before we get there, right? Because saving people's lives is obviously incredibly important. And I don't have any firsthand experience of how we could do that, but certainly like my sister's husband, he is also in PA school. And I know when he worked or when he was at Texas A&M, they had this fund where he could apply to get like medical recycling systems set up. So that's something that probably as more people care about the planet and are also medical professionals, we'll see more opportunities like that arise, would be my assumption. But yeah, that's just kind of my overall thoughts on it.
All right, Caitlin is going to be our final question. You're up, Caitlin.
All right. Hi, Shelby. So I am from Missouri S&T subscriber, and I had the privilege of growing up with family members who have been very, like they understand that there is climate change and that needs to be addressed, but they haven't moved forward with trying to decrease their waste or choosing other options to be more eco-friendly. So what would you suggest me or others to do to help them, encourage them to start making a change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Caitlin, yeah, thank you. I get this question a lot, and it's so hard because as many of you may know, my parents don't believe, well, I won't say they don't believe in climate change. They probably say they do for my sake, just so we can avoid that argument, but they're not. My parents don't live sustainably whatsoever. And I've had many challenges throughout my life trying to convince them to do anything different. And I find that until someone has a personal connection to it or understands why it's important, it's really hard to change someone's mind unless they want to, right? It's really difficult. But something I do always say is to speak to things that maybe they value more than the environment or more than sustainability. So for my mom, it's definitely speaking to things that can save time. Or that sort of thing. Because there are several examples of sustainable swaps or, things that you can do that are more convenient. Some things less, but some things more. And then for my dad, who is obviously, well, maybe you guys don't know this. I say this like you know him, but he's incredibly frugal. Like growing up, it was always like my mom was the spender and my dad was the don't buy that kind of guy. And so I try to present different things to him that different habits he can change and stuff like that in terms of how it can save him money. I think just framing this discussion in a different way that also has sustainable benefits is the way to convince people. But yeah, I also think that just like education and awareness is really important. But like you said, your parents already believe. So I think that's my best tip always is living like as an example and showing them examples of how it can benefit them, not just the planet.
And then if I could add on, so my boyfriend, like, it's difficult when going to the store because I'll like bring my own bags, put the produce in those bags, but he's more the one to go for like a plastic bag full of like oranges for a cheaper price. And it just seems, it's so difficult for him to to actively make the decision to not choose the plastic wrapped one.
Yeah.
And it's obviously much cheaper to choose the plastic thing. I don't know if you have any other suggestions for that.
Yeah, I see. I mean, I know that. So it is oftentimes the less sustainable thing is cheaper. But what I would say also, Caitlin, is maybe instead of focusing on like that thing that he does that he won't change, because I don't know if you know my partner, Madison, same situation. There are certain circumstances and things that she's just like, no, absolutely not. So I try to focus on other areas. And I know food specifically, since you're bringing that up, is like one of the biggest places where we create waste, because obviously we have to eat multiple times a day. But if you absolutely just can't get him to change that habit, I would suggest looking into other habits that maybe would get him on the ball, because I know the further they get into this journey, the more we can convince them to do more things. I've yet to convince Madison to hang dry her clothes. But as time goes on and as she makes these changes, I always try again. Like, don't you think you could just hang dry that? So I think, yeah, like getting the ball rolling in other areas, and then maybe eventually he changes his mind. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks. We're technically at time. And so I know that I have seen two hands, come back up. But what I want to do first, and first and foremost, is honor Shelbi's time, because she's spent a little bit of her time in the last couple of days prepping for today, is go ahead and just kind of make sure that our campus folks, let me share my screen again really quickly, know what's happening here on campus. Let's see. Now we talked about that. Let's see here. Swap this. Nope. The next talk we have to conclude Virtual Earth Month here at Texas A&M is a talk tomorrow at 3 o'clock, exploring the sustainability of cryptocurrency and textiles with current students Madison Saenz and Francesco Previto. So please, if you're available, join us tomorrow. And then the last thing I want to say before we wrap up with these things is that it's Earth Day, but it happens to be my colleague Ben's birthday. So happy birthday, Ben. Didn't want to go without acknowledging that. Yeah. So please feel free to join us tomorrow for our events. And if folks need to hop off, certainly do so. 12:07. And Shelbi, I would leave it to you. I don't know what you have coming up. I don't want to keep you on the hook for too terribly long. I see a couple hands.
Okay, yeah, I can do a couple more. I have another one you guys know at 1. So if you want to head over there after this, you could maybe ask more questions if we miss them here. But also, Kelly, before we do that, I wanted to say that this morning, like one of the first things Madison said to me when we woke up was like, oh, it's Earth Day. That means it's Ben's birthday. And I was like, how do you remember that? That's so funny. But yeah, happy birthday, Ben. We were thinking about you this morning.
All right, Laura Vientos. You still with us there, Laura? Okay, we'll move to basically vegans.
Hello?
Hi. Oh, yeah, you go first. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was trying to unmute. This was weird. Anyway, hi. I'm in New York. I had a question. I've started my sustainability journey sometime last year, and I work for a fast fashion company, which is very difficult for me because now that I'm so aware, when I go to work and when I work on everything that I do, it's really difficult for me to do my job. And I don't know how to approach my employer to sort of start the conversation about how to sort of implement things that are more eco-friendly when it comes to fashion, how to start changing this process.
Right.
Do you have any advice?
Yeah, it's really difficult because specifically when we talk about fast fashion, I just think that the business model itself is the problem, right? Like we see fast fashion brands releasing sustainable lines, and that's great. Recycled materials is great, but the overall, like, what do you call it? The business model, right? Of pumping out clothes that are not well made and don't last as long and are trendy and only meant to be cool for a short period of time. Like, I just think that overall idea cannot be sustained on a finite planet. And so I understand like the difficulty of aligning like your beliefs with your employer. It can so often be like such a struggle. And also I don't know exactly who you work for or if they have any sustainability initiatives, but also I think, what is it, Laura? Yeah. I think you can take a little bit of peace of mind and looking to other similar fast fashion brands or just the entire like sustainable fashion movement. We've made a lot of progress in the last few years, right? Like there have been changes and companies are becoming more transparent. They're getting called out and they're being held accountable. And I think that that's just hopefully encouraging for you. But as far as like individual changes businesses can make and how to start that discussion, I think I would definitely refer you over to Fashion Revolution, which, like I said, this is Fashion Revolution Week, and they're pumping out a ton of content, basically exactly what you're talking about. So I hope that's helpful. Like I said, if you know my story, I went from being like an incredibly hyper consumer to like an eco minimalist. So like I just have such a disdain for fast fashion overall, but also completely just want to say also that I understand that your income and also who you work for is not your fault. So don't have guilt about it, I guess would be my biggest thing to say there.
Good advice there, Shelby. Basically vegans.
Hi. I want to say my name is Rita. I always have my Google name up.
You're good.
I always comment on your videos as Rita. So
cool. Hi.
I was just wondering if you had any thoughts of the future, if anything's going to happen with microplastics. Like, do you think there will be a solution anytime soon? Because I know that's becoming a really big issue.
Right.
I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's so interesting because even the science behind microplastics is so new. Like it's something that we just like, well, plastics are new, right? In terms of like human evolution, and then like microplastics are such new science. I don't know of any like current legislation that's out there for it. Like I remember when Obama passed like no more microbeads in skincare. That was a big deal. But obviously now we're learning that it comes from carpets and clothing and like just everything. I'm hoping that something basically where legislation starts, right? Because this is an issue of like public health, an issue of like municipalities needing to implement better filters and all that sort of stuff, that there needs to be some sort of like nonprofit or activist group that introduces a bill there. I think that's really we can't remove them and they're like everywhere now. So really we just need to prevent them from getting into our waterways. But I don't currently know of any legislation that's currently happening. I do have a microfiber filter on my own washing machine. And also that is like something that could be implemented from the federal level, is that washing machines have to have those filters. I think that would make a lot of sense, but I don't currently know that there's anything like introduced with that specifically.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you to understand how much I love you. So this is really meaningful for me. You changed my life. So
oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy we could talk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. This is going to be our final question, just because we want to, again, Shelby's got another talk at 1 o'clock. I think someone dropped that link in the chat there. So Tessa,
thank you guys.
Hey Shelby. Wow, this is very cool. I love your videos.
Thank you.
But I am a nanny, and so I'm constantly going into these other people's home and taking care of their child, and they are not focused on sustainability at all. And I am trying to talk to the children about living more sustainably and making better choices, but it's really hard because, they have all these plastic pouches for food, all of those things. And I was just wondering if you had any tips for talking to the children in a way that's not disrespectful to the parents' choices, but making them see that we have to be conscious about what we're doing.
Right. Yeah. It's kids and the boundary with parents is so delicate because I think I've talked about this before, but my partner, she has 4 little nephews, and they have a father who is very opposed to anything I try to teach them. So I don't know if you have that same opposition with the parents that you talk to, but I think that there are a lot of ways to make sustainability fun for kids. So for example, something I've done with the nephews, is trying to make recycling fun, just like, because that's where you start, right? Every young environmentalist starts with recycling. And I don't know, Tessa, do they have access to recycling? I know that's not everybody.
They do, yeah. They have access to recycling, and our town has like compost pickup. So they do that, but it's more just like the parents don't recycle properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was kind of my goal with the boys, right? So their dad completely opposed to recycling. I hate to tell you this because it breaks my heart, but they have free recycling, and he just uses the recycling bin once their trash can is full. He just starts putting it. Anyway, regardless, that's something I took up like upon myself when I was visiting them, to try to get the boys interested in recycling and learning why it's important and like what it means when we don't do that, the impacts of it. And then like trying to teach them like quizzing them, because there's 4 of them specifically, and they always want to be the one that's right and always the one that gets the praise. So I would be like, okay, guys, is this recyclable or is this not? And I don't have kids. That's just my most like interaction I have with children. There's also there's a creator that I like called, she changed her name recently. Her name is Amber Allen. Her @ is, I believe, Fairly Local Family, and she has kids. And I think that maybe there's some help there that she could provide for you. Once I have kids, definitely will have more resources. But I think overall, Tessa, just trying to make learning about sustainability and why it's important fun, but also memorable. And you probably know a lot more about how to go about that than I do, because you interact with kids all the time. But yeah, just really thinking through activities like that could make it more entertaining for them, because kids don't want to just be talked at, you know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Shelbi, this is definitely, for me, it's the student becoming the teacher. This has been so fun.
I love that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, celebrating Earth Day with us. Look forward to continuing to follow your journey and learn from you. Thanks. And folks, if you haven't gotten enough of Shelbi, join her at 1 o'clock today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone who came. This was so fun. I feel like it was good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.